Thank you. So actually, to start, I'd like to share kind of a new project that I've embarked on with Kevin Ryerson. Um, I've worked with Kevin since the year 2001, and he channels a spirit being named Atun Ray, who, in my opinion, is the most intelligent person, dead or alive, that I've had conversations with. And Atun Ray says that he last lived on Earth about 3,500 years ago. He was a high priest in the time of the Pharaoh Akhenaten. And I connected with Kevin after I started to work on reincarnation research. And that started in 1995. And, you know, what happened was there were people that were coming to me with proposed reincarnation cases, and I didn't really have a way to determine if these cases were accurate or not. And let me start with, you know, one of the main purposes, if not the main purpose of this website, is to make the work of Ian Stevenson accessible to people around the world. Ian Stevenson did tremendous work. There's an enormous body of evidence that indicates that reincarnation is real. The problem is that Stevenson wrote for other academics. Stevenson was a professor of psychiatry, in fact, the head of the department at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. And for 40 years, he traveled around the world studying young children who had spontaneous past life memories. So typically a child, when they were like 3 years old or so, as soon as they learned to speak, they would start describing a past lifetime in great detail. And due to the detailed account, the biologic parents were able to locate the past life family. And when the child was reunited with the past life family, all the statements, or the majority of statements made by the child, were confirmed or validated by the past life family. And this is what Stevenson called a confirmed case, when the past life memories could be validated. And so one of the things that I have done, or kind of a mission of mine, has been to make Stevenson's work available to the average person, because he wrote for other academics, and his reincarnation accounts are very difficult to read because he was focused on evidence. So rather than tell the story in a straightforward way, he would create a table with, in the rows, there were the statements made by the child, and in the columns, there were the different witnesses to this case. So for each statement the child made, he would document which witnesses validated that child's statement. And it's a great way to write cases up, to focus on evidence, much like you would do in a trial, where each witness relates what they heard. And Stevenson pretty much pursued writing up his cases in the manner of a lawyer. Unfortunately, you know, for the average person, it's very difficult to follow these cases. And I mean, I have to be honest, it's difficult for me. Stevenson's work is difficult to get through. It's extremely important. As I said, it provides enormous evidence of reincarnation. So what I've done is I've rewritten his cases in simple language and in story form, so it's available to people. And the primary reason I'm motivated to do this is that reincarnation cases, including Ian Stevenson's cases, uh, demonstrate that we can change religion, nationality, and ethnic affiliation from one lifetime to another. Which, when I realized that, I just understood how this can really change the world for the better, because we're constantly seeing violence based on religion, uh, zealots who uh, immerse themselves in religious doctrine. In the last few days, there was a stampede at a Hebrew um, ceremony in Israel where 25 people or so were killed. The Taliban are threatening to take back Afghanistan. And all this violence is based on a misunderstanding of how life works. And this devotion to a particular religion or ethnic group um, is really suicidal in the end. We just end up killing ourselves because, again, the evidence of reincarnation shows that you could be one religion in one lifetime and another in another. So, for instance, the people who were maybe involved in, well, say the Taliban, in another incarnation, they can actually incarnate as Israelis. Well, once they understand that, people will stop fighting about this. And, actually sort of a sad thing for me is it just makes me realize how childish most of humanity is. I mean, you folks here are thinkers. You think for yourself. You're trying to understand life. Um, Whereas the average person uh, attaches to a religion and allows the religion to do all the thinking for them, so they don't have to try, they don't have to struggle with trying to understand theology or philosophy. And it's a sad thing, really, that humanity can't really get. The US, ETs are becoming mainstream. And in large part because these TV shows promote all the evidence of UFOs that are out there. And, I actually pulled the screen here for a series of articles that I started to write about ET species, because the spirit guide that I work with, Atun Ray, professes to know a lot about the ET species that visit us. So something similar is happening with reincarnation, where there are shows now on reincarnation cases. People who have been my friends over the last 25 years are now showing up on TV with their reincarnation cases, which is it's a breakthrough. And I was interviewed by one of these cable shows. It hasn't, my segment has not aired yet, but it's kind of a step forward. And so anyway, I'm a little bit hopeful that through these TV shows and through the website, people can be educated on evidence of reincarnation. And because this evidence shows we can change religion, nationality, and so forth, it will bring us to the next advancement of the human species. We're not there yet. It's going to take a couple decades, but it's starting. And one thing that, excuse me one second. One thing that will actually advance this is the UFO sightings. Because if you think about it, if there are ETs visiting our planet, which now there is very concrete evidence that they are, on the website you can see a picture there of the Tic Tac UFO that was caught on camera by an F-18 pilot. And this is actually an artist's depiction of what the pilot saw, which was about a 40-foot oval white UFO that that actually came very close to damaging his own aircraft. This UFO flew right past the nose of his plane, and he chased it for a while. And then it zoomed away at, multiple Mach speed. And if you think about it, well, if there are ETs that are visiting our planet, it's kind of doubtful that they believe in Mohammed or Jesus or Moses. I don't think they have those on their planet or planets. So, this, both the evidence of reincarnation and also now the evidence of UFOs and ETs is going to make humanity kind of rethink their position in the world. And Christianity has evidence of reincarnation. And because this evidence shows we can change religion, nationality, and so forth, it will bring us to the next advancement of the human species. We're not there yet. It's going to take a couple decades, but it's starting. And one thing that, excuse me one second. One thing that will actually advance this is the UFO sightings. Because if you think about it, if there are ETs visiting our planet, which now there is very concrete evidence that they are, on the website you can see a picture there of the Tic Tac UFO that was caught on camera by an F-18 pilot. And this is actually an artist's depiction of what the pilot saw, which was about a 40-foot oval white UFO that that actually came very close to damaging his own aircraft. This UFO flew right past the nose of his plane, and he chased it for a while. And then it zoomed away at, multiple Mach speed. And if you think about it, well, if there are ETs that are visiting our planet, it's kind of doubtful that they believe in Mohammed or Jesus or Moses. I don't think they have those on their planet or planets. So, this, both the evidence of reincarnation and also now the evidence of UFOs and ETs that, in the old days, you had to write books and go and do presentations, but because mainly what the evidence is information-based, the easiest way to distribute this is through the internet. So what I've done is I've taken Ian Stevenson's cases as well as other independently researched cases, and I put them together in easy to read form. And If you see on the left case categories, these are the different principles of reincarnation that are derived from Ian Stevenson's work and the work of others. And what this evidence shows is that from lifetime to lifetime, we can look very similar to what we look like in past incarnations. Stevenson was very big on birthmarks. He found that when somebody died of a traumatic wound in a prior lifetime, say a bullet wound or a gunshot wound, the individual who died would be reborn with a scar or birthmark at the same spot where the individual was wounded in the prior lifetime. And he went to great lengths to study this. You know, he went to get autopsy reports to get the angle that the bullet entered the body and so forth. And, you know, he wrote a 2,000-page book on reincarnation and biology, focused on these reincarnation cases and birthmarks related to the cause of death in the past lifetime. And I was sort of puzzled why he focused on this, where he also has cases that show that the face remains the same. And, you know, why did he focus on birthmarks rather than facial features, which are much more identifying? But basically the reason is because when Stevenson were studying these cases, you know, many of them which originated, you know, back at the beginning of the 1900s, many people did not have cameras. And many of his cases came from India or Burma, you know, countries where reincarnation was accepted. And because these cases came from relatively primitive societies, there were societies that believed in reincarnation, but they weren't affluent. So the people did not have cameras to take pictures. And that's something that's really changed, is that now with photography, we have the ability to compare facial features from one lifetime to another. And you really need to have the pictures to see the resemblance. Trying to scroll down here. Oh, so there it says evidence and principles of reincarnation. This is one of the cases where Stevenson was able to access photographs of the past life personality. So the person who's featured in this image is Daniel Jurdy, and he had spontaneous memories of being Rashid Kadich. And this was a classic Ian Stevenson case where, you know, the child spontaneously came up with these past life memories, and the parents were able to find the past life family based on the detailed memories. And Daniel Jurdy's past life memories were validated by the past life family. And in this way, Stevenson was able to get a picture, or he took this picture, and Jurdy is holding a picture of his past life persona, where it's basically the same facial architecture. And there's about 7 cases in Stevenson's work where these images are available that show similarity in facial features. But we have many other cases that show the same thing. If we go to the top here, you'll see the video evidence of reincarnation, which features the reincarnation case of Anne Frank. So that's a picture of Anne Frank as a young girl, and she reincarnated as a woman named Barbara Carlin. And Barbara has the same facial features as Anne. I can show them to if you like. And she has the same talent. She was a child prodigy writer and had about 8 books published in her teenage years. And here we have an image of Barbara Carlin and Anne Frank. And, you know, Barbara's case is basically an Ian Stevenson case where a young child has spontaneous memories of a past life, but there was no Ian Stevenson to study Barbara. So she had to kind of find her way on her own. And she wrote a book about her past life in 1996. And the president of the Anne Frank Foundation at the time, Budi Elias, met her and became a big fan. You know, he supported that Barbara Carlin is the reincarnation of his cousin. Budi Elias, the president of the Anne Frank Foundation, was the last living relative of Anne Frank. And they met and they had instant rapport. They fell into each other's arms. They cried. They talked for 2 hours. And then subsequently, Budi Elias introduced Barbara at her presentations in Europe. And, you know, why would he do that? In fact, he was attacked by members of the Anne Frank Foundation. You know, how could he support this woman who says that she is the reincarnation of Anne? But on this page, you can read the whole story, which is extremely convincing. And in her book, Barbara never says that she looks like Anne Frank, because her book was based on her memories. You know, I was the one who had started working on this physical resemblance angle of reincarnation research. So when I met Barbara for the first time in the year 2000, I already had it in my mind that people can look the same from one lifetime to another because of research of what I was doing. Ian Stevenson, by the way, first wrote that people can look the same from one lifetime to another in a book that he wrote in 1997. He started his research in 1960, but you have to ask, why did he write about this facial resemblance only in 1997 at the end of his career? And the answer is because there weren't pictures. So here we have the images that, in my opinion, show a clear resemblance. And not only is there the resemblance, but again, the same talent. Barbara was a prodigy whose first book was published at age 12, which became the best-selling prose book in Swedish history. And you can't fake that. And that's the reason, really, that Anne Frank is so famous. It's not because she had the worst death, you know, under the Nazis. It was because she was a gifted child writer. She wrote this diary that was that addressed deep deep questions about the goodness of man. And Barbara replicated that uh, spontaneously. So what I've done is I've taken these cases, put them in readable form, and supplied the images. And there's no book really or website that does that. So that basically, this is my mission, is to make these cases available to the average person. Side, sorry, it's allergy season and I've got a bit, but the case categories are all independently researched cases, such as from Ian Stevenson, that contain cases that demonstrate these principles. So if you go to birthmarks, these are all the cases, that demonstrate past life birthmarks. If you click on popular, those are the ones that are viewed the most. Xenoglossy is the phenomenon where a child is able to speak a language that they never learned in their current incarnation. And basically they knew that language from a past lifetime. And when they reincarnated, they were able to bring that ability with them.
Walter, tell us, I'm fascinated with what you've done about the ET reincarnation. Do ETs believe in reincarnation? Or do they...
That's a very good question. So, you know, I've been working on this for several months now with Kevin at Ryerson and Atun Ray. And, you know, one of the first questions I asked is, do ETs reincarnate? Is that how they evolve? And the answer is yes. So that is basically how souls develop in the physical world. ETs can incarnate as humans too. And they will bring certain abilities and talents based on, you know, their prior incarnation in an ET civilization. Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes, and I even write in my article that...
Okay, my daughter has 4 kids aging from 12 to 5. They're my grandkids, and each kid has a birthmark on them. It's about the same. It's about the size of a quarter. They're in different locations. One's on the shoulder blade, on the back, another one's on the ankle, another one's on the thigh, and the other one's on the forehead. They're all the same color. They're not deep purple like the Port of Wine birthmark, but they're pink, kind of a dark pink. Mm-hmm. And I've been wondering about this. I read your website and I read Ian Stevenson's things on birthmarks. I'm wondering if they might have all belonged to the same soul group and suffered some kind of trauma together where it did something to their bodies, and now they've come back and reincarnated together as my grandkids. What do you think of that?
It's very possible. And if you wanted to pursue that, there's 2 basic ways that people can try to learn about past lives. One is past life regression, but most researchers, such at the University of Virginia, do not feel that past life regressions are a reliable source to determining past life identities, which I agree with. I think if you want to pursue it, the easiest thing would be have a session with Kevin Ryerson, and you can speak to Atun Ray, and he can give you insight on the soul group as well as the...
Okay, thank you. I'd like to give Walter my thank you for your great speech about this stuff and your devotion to this subject, because I agree with you that the physical identification and research on reincarnation brings along with it ideas like life after death, life before life, and the amount of memory that we have been building up in our souls throughout the millennia. And this is so important to psychiatry, psychology, and I think spiritualists all over the world should devote a lot of energy into those researches, because we have in that research we have the validation of all these ideas, even life after death. So I think your work is very important. Ian Stevenson's work has been very, very important too. And just, I'd like to thank you for this job, and I think keep up the good work is just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much for that encouragement. And, you know, I have to share, which I bet a lot of you folks have experienced too, is that, you know, there's, I mean, society in general is so gripped with religious beliefs, you know, and there are very few people in my circle who really appreciate, you know, the research. And you know, my brother, who's an orthopedic surgeon, was never religious in his life. And then just recently, you know, he's become a devout Catholic, I think mainly because of his wife. And, you know, as my wife says, that, you know, her observation is people get religious towards the end of their lives, you know, because they want to make it to heaven, you know. And but they don't want to think for themselves, you know. They will just get the security from the religion that they may belong to, but the negative is it separates people. So it means a lot to me for you to say that.
My friend, pretty good friend, who's been feels he's been reincarnated. He's been accumulating materials and a lot of photos and so forth for many years. He feels that he, for one, was perhaps Sir Richard Burton of England, and has visited. There's a museum there and so forth. So he's really into it. And the other thing is he feels he was an ancient Egyptian, you know, maybe one of the power brokers, one of the rulers. So probably a little bit harder to prove. But I guess my question is are you able to accept, you know, a material of this kind that is not, you know, that you haven't sought out yourself?
Well, we do, and on the website homepage, there's a section that you know, asks people to submit their cases. So you know, people write to me all the time about who they think they may have been, and you know, my methodology is, you know, first I ask them to send me images of themselves and who they think they were before. I ask them what they do in this lifetime. I try to assess if they have similar talents. So again, I mean, one thing that's really striking in this work is that people do the same thing from lifetime to lifetime. You know, people who are mathematicians come back and do mathematics. And my understanding is that when we're created as souls, we are endowed with specific abilities or energies. And that's why artists come back as artists. You know, a good case on our website is the reincarnation of Paul Gauguin. And he can effortlessly, he died now, Peter T. Camp, but he was able to effortlessly recreate paintings that Gauguin did, where you can't tell the difference. And, you know, he was a career artist. So then, you know, I check, are the talents consistent? Then the next thing, you know, I may examine karmic groupings. So it is true that we come back in groups with people we've known before, worked before. So, try to assess, well, are there people in your lifetime now who seem to have been around you in the prior incarnation?
Mhm.
And, if all these things match, then I think it's a plausible case. And then I will either bring it up in a session with Kevin Ryerson that I have, or I will advise the person to have a session with Kevin. And if it's validated through all those steps, then I will post the case.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I was just wondering, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Brian Weiss's work.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I'm asking is the relevance of learning your past life for healing, for example, a current condition, like a medical condition.
Yeah, so I actually was on the board of regression organization for 8 years. So I'm pretty familiar with past life regression and that sort of thing. But again, past life regression is not a reliable way to make a past life identification. There's actually only one case that's on the website which is made that way, and that's the reincarnation case of a police captain named Robert Snow. Yeah, so with past life regression, there's like two aspects. One aspect is this the way you're trying to make a objective or find a specific past lifetime? And in general, past life regression is not very valid. But the part about healing, past life regression, like it can help people. So if you have a phobia and you have a regression, and it turns out this phobia that you visualize stemming from a past life death, that can help the individual. But whether they can make a specific past life identification, that's much more difficult.
I'm interested in the part of bringing back talents that you had in other lives. I'm old, and like for the beginning, say maybe 30 years. Well, I started investigating the afterlife about age 28, I'd say. But I have talents, abilities that I never trained for or I didn't understand. And yet I was able to do them really well.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I was sitting and watching like TV late at night, and there was a silly commercial about an old-fashioned singer, and he sang like this song from another country, but it was in English. And all at once I started singing in a different language that song, and I knew it. And I can sing that language, I mean any song in that language, but I was told I don't have the ability to share that. Can you give me any insight on that?
Wait, who told you couldn't share what?
I guess my spirit guide, maybe. I tried to show people that I could do it, and I wasn't able to. A different language would come out, actually. And so I asked, why can't I share it? And they said it was just for me. It was to help me.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is xenoglossy, where somebody can speak, or in your case, sing a language that they had not learned in this lifetime. So that is considered significant evidence of reincarnation. So you had to learn the language at some point, and but why your guide said it's just for you, it may just be that, most people can't deal with it. I shared, with my family, they can't deal with it. They're deeply into their religious, trip. So you might want to ask your guide again. Well,
Okay.
I think saying it's just for you makes sense to me.
Well, I have probably 20,
I
but
know you. Oh, that's why I
No,
said, question.
Which every question costs $1, so like prioritize.
well, I just want to see if you have come across that. I try at the moment to find subjects like reincarnation, which are so controversial because so many people have so many different ideas, and I want to find what the underlying idea is, so where we all fit in really into a subject. So I have spoken to this gentleman who has contact, I find that really interesting, with lives who are now lived now, because everything is supposed to be now. They live now and they are aware. He has conversation with them and they are aware of him in his timeline, in his time slice, and he is aware where they are now and what they are living now. And then one of his contacts is very famous. So he was saying, okay, you tell me things I would absolutely not know and people don't know about you. So this gentleman did, and then he had a movie or a book came out about this famous person, and there was, oh, this has information nobody knows about. And that was exactly what he had been told. So he believes that though it is a part of him, but it is a different timeline, and that everything exists now. So what we are tapping into is not something we lived before, but part of us lives now. What do you think of that?
It's baloney. I know this is a very popular new age concept that past and future and now is all one, and which it doesn't really make any sense from a scientific point of view. But this is something I did, discuss many times with the spirit guide Atun Ray, and he has stated that on Earth there is a definite timeline, and there is past, present, and future. And when people, actually Brian Weiss, first of all, I want to say I'm glad that Brian Weiss did the work that he did to bring reincarnation more in the mainstream. And the reason he had an impact mainly is because Oprah took a liking to him. But in all his books, there is not one case that was factually validated, not one. And that's kind of the problem with regression is, most of the time people make stuff up and there's no way to validate it. He also proposed that, you can tap into your future lives. Well, again, that's baloney. You can't tap into a life that you haven't had yet. So there's a lot of misconceptions in new age thought that I don't believe are valid.
Well, I would love to speak to your, what is his name? I would love to speak to you. I have so many questions.
Oh yeah, it's not that expensive. He charges $275 US. You can get appointments in the near future, and the only issue is whether there's a time difference and whether that can make it difficult. But
I'm in Sydney. I have time all the time.
Thanks, Walter. That's very fascinating. Could you tell me whether you've worked out any significance or any mechanism for people to be similar in facial characteristics? Does that matter? Is it part of their journey to be like that? That's one question. Another question would be, why do you have upside down pictures on your website? And thirdly, have you asked Artem Ray where Akhenaten is buried? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I have not asked where Akhenaten was buried, though Aten Ray's last lifetime was as a high priest in the court of Akhenaten. So that's a quick one. What were the other points you brought up?
About the mechanism of the facial similarity.
Okay. And actually, this brings up if on the home page, there's that picture of Daniel Jurdy that I pointed out, and there's a link right above it, Evidence and Principles of Reincarnation, and that will take you. It will not only describe the principles of reincarnation, such as physical resemblance, but there will be links to all the Stevenson cases and other cases that show physical resemblance. So all that is condensed in that page, evidence, principles and evidence of reincarnation. So that is a good place to start from if you want to share this information with other people.
Pictures upside down.
Oh, upside down, yeah. So that's that is done. It's easier to appreciate facial architecture that way. The brain, it's programmed so that when you see people, your eyes and your brain try to distinguish people so that they look different. That's how you can tell people apart. So your brain focuses on, is this Jane or Joe or Boris or whoever. That's how we're able to identify people. And so our brain is very good at seeing differences.
Yeah.
But if you put, and I should say that, when I say people look the same, what stays the same is the bone structure. So when I showed the pictures of Anne Frank and Barbara Carlin, her bone structure is the same. In her case, pretty much everything's the same. But in other cases, if you invert the pictures, you're better able to appreciate the overall bone structure, which is what stays the same. So, for instance, you could be Caucasian in one lifetime and Asian in another. Features like the eyes will be different, but the overall bone structure will be the same. Same thing if you're born African American in one lifetime, you're going to have the same bone structure, but you will have African American features, such as thicker lips and so forth. So it's the bone structure that seems to stay consistent, and that's easier to appreciate when the images are upside down. Because again, if you look at right side up, you're going to say, oh, well, this person has thicker lips. You sort of get sidelined by all these little differences. So that's the reason.
Yes, Walter, good evening. Thanks for the presentation. My question is, there's a guy, I think they call him Schwartz, who's done over 30 years of research on and wrote at least 2 books. One's called The Journey of Souls and one's called The Destiny of Souls, where he has done past life regression and life in between lives.
Yeah.
And he's done over 3,500 interviews under hypnosis. And the stories from all the people that he's done this with are consistent. So, which would rather, it wouldn't be dismissed. And the second comment I'd like to make is what's commonly known as a doppelganger. So I've got an absolute double, who even the guy's daughter mistook me for her father the first time she saw me. And we are no relation whatsoever. We're exactly the same stamp, the same height, the same colour eyes, the same facial features. You would, if you looked at us both together on a photograph, you'd say we were identical twins.
And what does that person do for a living?
Totally different to me.
Yeah. So first of all, physical resemblance by itself doesn't mean it's a reincarnation case. So two people can look very similar, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a reincarnation case. I mean, that's just coincidence. You know, there's only so many facial types in the human species. So it may just be coincidence. The other thing that does occur, which I haven't mentioned before, is a phenomenon that I call split incarnation. An older term is parallel lives, where one soul can inhabit more than one body at a time. And there are even these types of cases in Stevenson's literature. So that is a possibility. I mean, it is possible that this individual and you derive from the same soul. And the way, by the way, I should say, the way I think, you know, the physical resemblance works is that the soul, and this kind of ties back to what that page about evidence of reincarnation. I have a diagram there of how I think it works, where, you know, the soul projects a energy template into the developing fetus. And this energy template conveys the physical appearance. And in addition, this energy template can download information, which is why people tend to do the same thing from lifetime to lifetime, because they've had experience before and their soul transmits it into their body. It's this energy template that I believe, you know, causes your physical appearance. And this person that you're talking to, again, he could be somebody who comes from the same soul, but I would then think that this person would have a parallel career path. Again, it could be just coincidence, but there is this phenomenon of split incarnation.
I was wondering, how do we reach Kevin Ryerson for a reading?
If you just Google Kevin Ryerson, he'll come up. Or on our website, there's a search bar, and just put in Kevin Ryerson. It's Ryerson, and he'll pop up.
Okay, great, thank you.
And you know, both Kevin and Atun Ray are wonderful people. In fact, I consider them my best friends on the planet. I mean, I've been working with Kevin and Atun Ray for 21 years now. And, you know, I like to tell people that, you know, my best friend is this spirit up there who I talk to, you know, once or twice a month. And, you know, my wife then gasps, you know, because she says, don't tell people that, they think you're weird. But
we
then,
don't. We
I
understand completely.
Yeah, I know I'm weird, so it's okay.
That's
fine. You're with friends.
I know, that's what I meant. You know, this kind of way, it's kind of personal for me because, you know, my own brothers are not open enough to look into this. And even though one brother is an orthopedic surgeon trained at Stanford, you know, one thing that I've noticed is, you know, people can be very smart in one way and totally ignorant in another. And you know, that's kind of what I feel with, you know, my brother is he's so smart in certain ways. He's made a ton of money, but he doesn't have the openness or the desire to search into these topics on his own. And you know, so for me, I really welcome your company and thank you for your support.
Thank you. Well, tell me, did you wait until you had retired from medicine in order to do this research?
No, I did not. And in fact, you know, the last 15 years of my career, I worked at a place called Kaiser Permanente, which is the biggest HMO in the United States. And you have to, when you get hired, there's 3 years until you can be made a partner into the medical group. If you're not made a partner for any other reason, you have to leave. And, you know, my first book came out in my first year at Kaiser, and I knew this could, you know, sabotage my career, but, you know, I thought it was important enough that I had to do it. So,
what was the reaction amongst your medical colleagues?
well, you know, there were a few that were very interested and supportive, but the vast majority, kind of like my brother, you know, they thought it was too strange, too weird, that, you know, how can you prove this? You know, you can't use a PCR. You know, do people know what PCR is? Polymerase chain reaction. You know, that's the chemical reaction that allowed DNA sequencing. It changed the world, you know. So if you listen, you know, to reports about COVID and testing, they'll say, well, is this the PCR test or another test? And what also gives me gratitude is the Nobel laureate who invented PCR, who changed the world. And in fact, biologists say that the field of biology can be separated into 2 eras, the one before PCR and the one after PCR. Because again, all the mapping of the human genome, all these tests like the PCR COVID tests, they're all based on this invention of this Nobel laureate named Kary Mullis. Well, guess what? Kary Mullis and his wife both agreed to be in my book as reincarnation cases. They supplied photographs, they signed releases, and they're in my books. And so here is my dumbass brother, orthopedic surgeon, who won't even consider this material because now he's a devout Catholic. But the fellow who changed the world with PCR is a case in my book with images and signed releases and everything. So, you know, it's good to be among people of similar minds.
I think everybody here can agree with that, Walter.
Yeah.
We've all had that same experience of
Yes.
our nearest and dearest think we're nuts.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, with the ET, you were just saying it's all new age stuff that maybe we don't really have just a linear timeline. Because I really just want to understand where all this information fits in together. So obviously the ET don't work with the spirit realm. They just move their consciousness in another container and keep learning. So, but they will say to us that the physical world has different timelines, and they say they're different vibrational timelines. Then I speak also to spirit people who lived here 3,500 years ago, and they talk about the same thing, and they talk also about that we just need to maybe look at many different aspects, how they're all right, and they all have the same basis when you look at it. What do you think of that?
Well, no, I'm a scientist by nature. My entire education has been in biology and medicine. And I've been open to these kinds of ideas. And, I should mention I have a book called Origin of the Soul and the Purpose of Reincarnation, where I discuss all these things. And it's through these dialogues with Atenrei, the spirit being, that, I would ask these questions and I put the answers to these dialogues in this book. And I've asked that question about parallel timelines and or simultaneous timelines, and Atenrei has always told me that's not true. And as a medical doctor, these things about everything happening at once just does not make any sense at all. So, I try to stick to, concrete ideas that will help humanity. Whereas, no offense, but what you're talking about is going to just confuse people.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I just think that there have to be, we can't, like religion gave us this and this and this, and now we have other ideas, and they just give us this and this and this. And, and nobody is wrong. It's just there is so many sides to the one subject. And so I wonder if when there is disclosure, and like, at the moment, I can speak to 5 races, but there are obviously endless races who have different ideas as well, who bringing in with the human ideas. I just wonder if we stay really open-minded to other input to the same subjects we can learn from. That's all.
Well, but again, an example is astrology. I mean, I've been trying to understand all these things throughout my whole life. So I actually studied astrology. I wrote a book on astrology. It's called Astrology for Regular People, and it's a book with lots of pictures, just like my website. And, my goal with that book was to help people really understand what astrology is. Because most people have no idea. They just,
I have no idea.
Yeah, they just know about their sun sign and so forth. But, people who really get into astrology, it becomes their religion. And I studied astrology to just really try to figure out what is all this about. And, as I say in my book, Origin of the Soul, astrology does not determine your personality. If you look at reincarnation cases, as I mentioned, talents, personality tend to be the same across lifetimes. I use the analogy comparing reincarnation to going to sleep. When you go to sleep at night, you wake up in the morning and you remember being who you were the night before. But with reincarnation, it's very similar. You go to sleep, but when you wake up, you can't remember who you were. And because of that, we kind of struggle through life trying to figure it out. My conclusion was that that astrology is not valid for that purpose. And I can say that because I wrote a book about it. I consider myself an expert. But there's a fellow who's a clairvoyant who's been a friend of mine for many years. And, he would tell me, don't put anything down. And he himself would have astrologers at his talks. But in my mind, all he's doing is deluding people, and if something is not valid, my stance is I'm going to say it's not valid. And, try to tease out what is the truth and what is falsehood. And actually, the whole point of the website is to give people the evidence. So, when there's that tab on the left side of the website that says physical resemblance, it's not an essay of me telling me my opinion on what's going on. What I did is I put all the Stevenson cases that show physical resemblance on that one page. And then a person can go to each page and read the evidence for themselves. So, I'm evidence-based, and, I try to use my own common sense on what's true or not. And, there's kind of two ways of looking at this, or a couple ways. I mean, it sounds like you're a medium, is that correct?
Yeah, not working medium though.
Okay, so
He's pushing me.
there's one aspect where you want to be open to mediumship and maybe communicate with spirits and ETs or whoever. And by the way, Atun Ray, professes to know these ETs personally. So
he would if he is.
He's in communication with the various ETs. And, where I'm coming from is I'm trying to make the world a more peaceful place. And to do that, I have to explain reincarnation to people in a way that they can understand. And really, that's the reason why religion has such a grip on society, because most of society wants a very simple story. So Jesus died for your sins, he resurrected, just worship Jesus and you're going to get into heaven. Or Islam is very simple. You have to pray, 5-6 times a day. So what I'm trying to do is get, the world population really to wake up to reality and stop, putting your efforts into these story tales that are 2,000 years old or 6,000 years old. I mean, just like science has changed over time, spirituality has to advance. And I kind of make the joke that, if we relied on transportation technology in the way that we rely on the major religions, we'd all be riding around on donkeys. But riding around in a car and an airplane is a lot more fun and efficient. And in the same way, we have to stop clinging to these religious beliefs that are thousands of years old, especially when we have concrete evidence of reincarnation. There is much more evidence of reincarnation than any religion. And that's the message.
Fantastic. Well, I think on that note, Walter, we will thank you. And I would just like to commend you on your perseverance and the scholarship that your website shows. I'm constantly blown away by it when everything I read. And I think you're doing a huge service to mankind to make the work of Ian Stevenson, to categorize it and to bring it down so that people can access it. And
well, thank you so much. It means a lot.
I think the more that I read it, the more impressed I am with the hours and hours and years of work that's gone into it. And of course,
it has. It has. That's absolutely correct.
It is really, it's a wonderful legacy that you've created there.
Walter, this was interesting. And, I think it all comes down to we need to just be the best we can be, the most loving we can be. And certainly the information you're presenting is fascinating. And I really want to thank you for the presentation. I hope you'll come back again and give us some more, because I'm sure we only scratched the surface.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else like to say something to Walter?
I
Hyacinth?
would like
Thank you,
to thank
Hyacinth.
Walter, because I do agree that if people would understand that there is reincarnation, that is a fact, we wouldn't do the things we do.
Absolutely.